What's up, everybody? It's Dakota, and today we're going to be going over another standard deck. Today we're actually going to be looking at an archetype that has spawned two different decks leading up to the World Magic Cup, and even still is like the same deck but spawns two different styles to play the deck. And the one that I like of the two, and the one that I'm going to be going over today, is it Drake's playing Arclight Phoenix. So I'm going to kind of outline the difference between this version of Is It Drake's and other versions of it. Other versions of Is It Drake's before sideboarding and everything either usually play Arclight Phoenix, and then obviously the Drakes, or the other version of the deck plays the Drakes, but instead of playing Arclight Phoenixes, plays some number of Niv Mizzets and Murmuring Mystics in the main board. The reason why I kind of like this deck better, or why I like this version better than the other one, is because this one's a little bit faster. It can usually go over the top of some players, just giving you a really aggressive draw. Like getting back to Arclight Phoenixes in one turn can be pretty huge, like on turn 2 or turn 3. So that's kind of where the draw to playing this version of the deck is that you can go over the top and kill your opponent super quick. So going over the creatures, another big reason to play this deck is Enigma Drake and Crackling Drake. Both get power and toughness equal to the number of instants and sorceries in your graveyard, with Crackling Drake having the extra bonus of also including instants and sorceries that are in exile, and when it enters the battlefield draws a card. Arclight Phoenix, another big reason why I believe that of this one is this deck is better than the other version. It's a 4-mana 3/2 with flying and haste. And at the beginning of your combat on your turn, if you cast 3 or more instant sorcery spells this turn, you return it from your graveyard to the battlefield. So, really important to note, it only cares even if you cast, not when you cast your third one, it's being in combat on your turn. So while it kind of makes you have to spend some of your spells on your main phase, it's still beneficial if you have opening hands that consist of a 1 or 2 Arclight Phoenix and then either Tormenting Voice or Charter Course. It lets you easily get rid of those cards. Also, being able to ditch them to jumpstart Maximize Velocity and really get you your Crackling Drakes and your Enigma Drakes the turn you play them haste, and be able to hit your opponent for a ton of damage is pretty good too. So kind of looking at the spells, in playing Arclight Phoenix, you're kind of stuck with playing some in other decks pretty bad cards, but for this deck actually some of the stat boosts or whatever are relevant. Starting with Crash Through, giving your creatures trample and draws a card, so it basically just replaces itself, it cycles it. And if you already have an Enigma Drake or a Crackling Drake on the battlefield, obviously having it being a even 8-9 power flyer with trample is very good, while sometimes might not be relevant if you're playing against, say, the other version of the deck that plays Murmuring Mystic. You can actually beat through their bird tokens, so being able to kill their bird tokens and still getting damage instead of just getting chump blocked for turn after turn. Maximize Velocity, if I can hover over it, gives a creature +1/+1. The important part, gives it haste, so you can play. You have turns where maybe it's late in the game, your opponent taps out to play their bomb or whatever, says go, and you have a turn where if you chipped in with enough damage with even Arclight Phoenix, put them to who knows, 12, 13 or something like that, you could feasibly play an Enigma Drake and then give it haste, or a Crackling Drake and give it haste, and then just kill your opponent or put them to nearly dead so that your shocks can feasibly finish them off. A shock or even just one more hit from an Arclight Phoenix could kill your opponent. And I really liked this card just for that. You could just kill someone out of nowhere with that card or put them to nearly dead. Keeping on with some more of the 1-mana spells, Opt, scry 1, draw a card. Very good, especially in a deck that really wants to find Arclight Phoenixes and the other 8 copies of its threats that it wants to be playing. Shock, getting rid of the smaller creatures, well, not really important, because we're not really worried about the ground. We're worried more about the the bigger creatures in the air. It gives you a little bit of reach, and it has some utility getting rid of like their mana dorks or their other Goblin Electromancer is another good one. Getting rid of the small creatures on the board so you can tempo them by keeping your life total high and forcing them to have answers to your things instead of trying to race with them. Warlord's Fury, another card, kind of like Crash Through, where it's not really good on its own or in a vacuum, but when you're playing against like even the mirror match or playing against like Doom Whisperers and things of that nature, Warlord's Fury is very good because it can give your Drakes first strike. And obviously with them, in theory, having the high power, usually just ends up hitting and killing whatever decides to block it. Means that they're probably having another hard time winning the game, and it draws a card. Lets you cycle through your deck more, see more cards, so you can try to bin your Arclight Phoenixes or even see your Drakes. Chart a Course, draw 2, and then you don't care if you have to discard a card, because most of the time you can just discard an Arclight Phoenix or one of your Jumpstart cards. So it's not like you really had to discard a card, because then you still get to keep that spell in hand. Also, sometimes when you just attack with an Arclight Phoenix or a Drake, it just draws 2 cards, and that's totally fine, especially when you're trying to find more threats and more ways to earn more spells to have your Drakes close out the game. One of Entranced Melody in the main board, while this card is weird, and in probably previous standards, this card hasn't been good, but with this card, it's actually very good in the mirror match, because you can conceivably see enough of your deck where you're going to see at least you need about 5 mana to steal a Enigma Drake and 6 for a Crackling Drake. You can easily cantrip through enough of your deck and see enough lands to where you can play this card and steal a Crackling Drake, and even probably steal other creatures in other matchups. Like the black-green, you could take their Doom Whisperers, you can take some of their other creatures, and also Niv Mizzet. If it ever arises that you need to take a Niv Mizzet from your opponent or anything like that, this card allows you to do it. And being a one-of, you'll see it consistently, but most of the time it won't be in your opening hand, which is not where you want it. You want to be able to cast a bunch of your spells to make these guys bigger and to get Arclight Phoenix back. Tormenting Voice, discarding card, again, not really relevant or that bad, considering that you want to be ditching Arclight Phoenixes and you have some of these other Jumpstart cards, and you might even have some do-nothing cards in your hand as well. So just get rid of an irrelevant card, draw 2 cards, sort of kind of like Chart a Course, just you discard the card up front instead of discarding after you draw cards. Beacon Bolt, a very efficient removal spell, and it's essentially has two parts to it, or you can cast it twice. That's why they only play really 2 copies in the deck, because you can cast this card essentially 4 times, seeing both copies, and kills just about every creature in the format, given if you have enough spells to make it work. I want to Fight with Fire, a card that you can kick, but a lot of the time just very good at getting rid of Niv Mizzets and other Drakes and things of that nature. And then the mana base, I mean, you're playing a 2-color deck, so we have Sulphurfall, Steam Vents. Not playing any Guild Gates because you really want your lands, for the most part, to come in and play untapped. And as long as your opener doesn't have double Sulphurfalls, or only a Sulphurfall, the majority of the time, all of this deck's lands are going to come in and play untapped. So, going to the you can make an argument for some cards on the sideboard being in the main board, taking some of the main board cards out, and trying to work it so you either take out this package of can win the game out of nowhere or really get close to winning the game, to playing a more reactive game plan by playing Dive Down. I could see some decks playing Dive Down over the Maximize Velocity, just so they have protection for their Drakes, instead of just play the Drake, haste it up, and try to swing, and possibly maybe getting blown out by a removal spell. But I would say it all depends on your store meta or wherever you're playing. I think game ones, a lot of the time, I like Maximize Velocity more than Dive Down, but that's just personal preference to a lot of people. And again, whatever you expect to see. Shivan Fire is a kind of a way, like I said, you kind of cantrip through your deck a lot, and this card you could probably pretty reliably kick. Also being another kind of shock effect, where if you just need more removal against like the other, like the red-white creature decks, the mono-white decks, which we will be going over hopefully here soon. But Shivan Fire, just a very efficient and can sometimes just deal 4 damage to a creature, which being in the some of the mono-white decks and that nature can be pretty good. And again, you more than likely will not have a problem hitting your land drop every turn. Disdainful Stroke, gives you some game against control decks. Teferi being a big thing. Unfortunately, Niv-Mizzet, for whatever reason, has this type line can't be countered, but if you wanted to, you could target with Disdainful Stroke. Just don't expect it to do anything. But in all seriousness, Disdainful Stroke being really good against those removal spells, and obviously the control decks and everything, being able to counter Teferis and that nature is pretty good from what I've been told. Another Entrancing Melody, definitely a card that you want to bring in for the mirror. Gives you a 9th and 10th copy of a Drake as long as your opponent obviously plays one, but most of the time this card just comes in for the mirror. I'd imagine there's probably some other matchups you could bring it in for, but me personally, I wouldn't. Negate, another control card. Obviously, you can bring this in against the other removal heavy decks just to protect your Drakes more. That's kind of what this deck wants to go for, is just to slam one of these threats, or slam an Enigma Drake or a Crackling Drake, and then just be able to protect it post board. Search for Azcanta, just a very good card. There's probably an argument for having this card in the main board as well, kind of like Dive Down, and possibly even partially, like, there's an argument you could have where Negate or Dive Down could be Spell Pierce instead, but that's another conversation for another day. But Search for Azcanta, very powerful card, can dig for all your other spells when it flips, but most of the time you're probably keeping it on its front half just to dig through your deck and search for your threats, or bin Arclight Phoenixes of that nature. More Fight with Fires, Niv-Mizzet and Lyra Dawnbreaker are heck of a card, so much so that you want to devote some sideboard slots to it. So Fight with Fire being a good one, just to an early removal spell that can kill Lyra's reliably, a little bit more reliably than the Beacon Bolts, but having 5 total copies of ways to kill Drakes and Lyras and Niv-Mizzets is pretty good. And then we have 2 Niv-Mizzets of our own. Just a very powerful card. Again, another card that you can make an argument for putting in the main board, and a card that I wouldn't fault for someone playing in the main board, because this card is really that good. But you'll probably end up cutting like Arclight Phoenixes and that nature, and being a deck that's trying to play the long game rather than try to win the game on like the 3rd or the 4th or 5th turn of the game. But yeah, that's gonna be it for this deck that I have on screen right now. A few of the things that I would look at and consider changing, or things that if I was going to offer the deck to somebody and kind of tune it to whatever playstyle that they want. Again, I could see the Dive Downs being a main board card, just being able to protect Crackling Drake and Enigma Drake. And if you were going to put the Dive Downs on the main board, I would play some number of Niv-Mizzet Perun, and consider playing Murmuring Mystic as well. Because of all these cheap cards, you are able to just make a ton of bird tokens, and that's a way that you can go over the top as well, as making 5-6 birds. Even if Murmuring Mystic makes 5 or 6 birds, and then they have to waste a removal spell on it, you're probably pretty likely to win the game. At least in game ones, because the only card that you really have to worry about is Deafening Clarion, but Deafening Clarion doesn't kill Murmuring Mystic, even after you've made a ton of birds. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm going to leave it at. If there's anything that I missed, or an archetype that you want me to go over, or if you want me to go over the other version of Izzet Drakes that does play more of the control-y protection Niv-Mizzet plus Murmuring Mystic, I'd be more than happy to do so. And that's going to be it for Arclight. I'm going to call it Arclight Drakes instead of Izzet Drakes, just because this is this is different, and the game plan is different from the other version of the Drake. So that's going to be it for Arclight Drakes for Standard. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like. Consider leaving a comment what deck that you would like to see next in Standard. Again, I have definitely want to go over White Red Aggro, because that's a very popular deck. That's a deck that people will definitely be playing for a long time, as long as we keep all the good white and red cards in Standard. Even going over Selesnya tokens as well, which I secretly think is one of the better decks in the format that people don't necessarily look out for. And even, of course, Jeskai Control, because while other people are getting to have fun, you might as well be the person to say no. But that's going to be it for me. Again, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like and comment down below another deck that you want to see, or something you would like to see from my channel. And please consider subscribing to see more videos like this. I will be posting more Standard deck techs, because Standard is awesome right now. Getting back into Modern here soon, with more going over some of the decks that you could be playing in Modern as well, because I still think that format's sweet. And even going over some competitive tips and tricks that I've learned, and things that will help you either at your next FNM or PBTQ, IQ, World Tour, or whatever tournament, even if it's just playing with 3 of your other friends, like things that'll help you get better in the game. But that's going to be it for this deck tech on Arclight Drakes. I hope to see you guys in the next video.